The bullet hit 2 inches from Captain Cole's face. He didn't flinch. He was already screaming, "Any snipers here? Anyone?" And nobody answered. 41 men pinned behind crumbling rock while over 160 enemy fighters closed in from 3 sides. Communications dead. Reinforcements 63 minutes out. The math was simple and brutal. Then, at the very back of the chaos, a dusty rifle case clicked open. Nobody heard it. Nobody looked. But the man holding that case had already started counting his shots. And he only had enough to save everyone. What happened next should not have been possible. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what this quiet man does next. The morning of the ambush, nobody remembered Noah Reed's name. That was fine by him. He'd spent 3 years building a life where nobody remembered his name. He drove a 12-year-old pickup that burned oil. He packed his daughter's lunch every morning before she woke up peanut butter on the left side of the bread, never the right, because Emma said it tasted different depending on which side, and he showed up to work early and left late and never gave anyone a reason to look twice at him. He was a supply clerk, 41 years old, single father, quiet man. That was the whole story as far as anyone at Firebase Kessler knew. Staff Sergeant Darnell Briggs had worked alongside Noah for 7 months and still sometimes forgot he was in the room. "Reed's like furniture," he'd told someone once, not unkindly. "Solid, useful, always where you need him. You just stop seeing him after a while." Noah had overheard that. He hadn't minded. Being seen in his experience cost more than it was worth. The mission that morning was supposed to be simple. Captain Ethan Cole's reconnaissance unit, 41 men lightly armed, was tasked with verifying a supply route through the Blackstone Valley corridor. Intel said the region was cold, low enemy presence. Get in confirmed the road was viable. Get out before noon. Noah wasn't even supposed to be there. Private Castillo. The unit's assigned supply specialist had gone down with a fever 2 nights before, and Noah had been the closest warm body with the right clearance. He'd thrown his kit together in 20 minutes, climbed into the back of the 3rd Humvee, and spent the first hour of the drive reading a letter from Emma that she'd tucked into his jacket pocket without telling him. "Dear Daddy." It started in her careful 8-year-old handwriting. "Don't be boring while I'm at school. Do something exciting." He'd smiled at that, folded it back up, tucked it against his chest. He should have knocked on wood. The ambush came at 0847. It came from above the ridgeline to the northeast, exploded first, and Noah felt the pressure wave before he heard the sound. RPG. Close. The lead Humvee took the blast on its front quarter panel and jackknifed sideways across the road, and before anyone could process what was happening, automatic weapons fire opened up from 3 directions simultaneously. Someone had been watching them for a long time. Someone had planned this carefully. Contact northeast, all units." The radio dissolved into static. Then comms are jammed. We're jammed. And then the screaming started. Noah went flat by instinct, rolling behind a concrete drainage barrier at the side of the road. He pressed himself against it and breathed one breath, controlled the way he'd trained himself years ago not to think about, and he assessed. Simpson, ridgeline to the northeast, at least 3 machine gun positions, elevated overlapping fields of fire. Tree line to the west, muzzle flash every 4 to 6 feet, infantry, maybe 40, maybe more, advancing behind suppressive fire. Southern approach, a second element moving to flank, cutting off the retreat. He counted. He calculated. We're surrounded. He pressed his back against the barrier and closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. Emma packed her own lunch this morning. She's fine. She's in school. She does not need to know about this. Then he opened his eyes and got to work. Captain Ethan Cole was 34 years old and had been in difficult situations before, but nothing like this. He scrambled behind the burning Humvee, pulling Private Garza by the collar. The kid had frozen, just completely locked up. and Cole didn't have time to talk him through it, so he grabbed him and moved him physically, and shoved him behind cover and said, "Stay down, stay small, stay breathing," and moved on. "Briggs!" he shouted over the fire. "Here, sir." Briggs materialized from somewhere to his left, bleeding from a cut above his ear rifle up. "How many?" "Can't get a count. A lot, sir. The ridge." "I see the ridge. If they get a mortar team set up on that ridge, I know Briggs." Cole pulled out his radio and tried again. Static. He tried the secondary frequency. More static. Whoever had planned this ambush had planned it well. The jamming was professional, layered. Not insurgent-grade work. This was something more organized, more patient. He did the math in his head and hated every number he came up with. 41 men. Ammunition for a sustained firefight of maybe 30-40 minutes. Reinforcements at Firebase Kessler 60-plus minutes out. Assuming someone back at base realized something had gone wrong, which they wouldn't for at least another 20 minutes, because the unit wasn't due to check in until 0930. He looked at the ridge line. He looked at the tree line. He looked at his men crouched firing, holding but barely, and he understood with cold clarity that holding for 60 minutes against this was not something math supported. He needed something the math wasn't accounting for. "Any snipers here?" He didn't mean it as a real question. He meant it as an expression of desperate need, the kind of thing a man shouts because he has to shout something. "Anybody? Any sharpshooters in this unit?" Silence. Gunfire. Someone screaming for a medic. And then from somewhere behind him, quiet as a door closing. "Sir." Cole turned. The man standing behind him was nobody. That was Cole's honest first impression, and he'd feel guilty about it later. The man was nobody. Average height, average build, dust on his face, carrying a rifle case that looked older than some of the soldiers in the unit. He had the kind of face you'd forget 30 seconds after looking at it. Calm eyes, no visible emotion. He held the case in both hands, relaxed like it was something he carried every day. "Who are you?" Cole demanded. "Reed. Supply. I was Castillo's replacement." Cole stared at him. "You're the supply clerk." "Yes, sir." "Why do you have a—" Cole looked at the case. It was long, narrow. The latches were worn smooth from use. "What's in that case, Reed?" "A solution to your ridgeline problem if you'll let me find a position." Something in the man's voice made Cole stop. Not the words, the tone. It wasn't bravado. It wasn't desperation. It was the voice of someone describing a task they had done before and were confident they could do again. Measured. Professional. Almost gentle. "You're a sniper," Cole said. Noah Reed looked at the ridgeline. His eyes moved in a way that Cole would later describe as scanning efficient, quick professional. The eyes of someone doing math. "I'm a father," Noah said. "But I used to be something else." He looked at Cole directly then, and Cole felt something shift in the air between them. "Give me a position, and don't crowd me," Noah said. "I'll buy us time." Cole had spent his career learning to read men under pressure. It was a survival skill, the ability to look at someone in a crisis and know instantly whether they had something real inside them or whether they were going to fall apart. He looked at Noah Reed for 3 seconds. "Corporal Huang," he shouted. "Get this man to the elevated position at the drainage junction. Move." Noah followed Huang at a jog, head down, weaving between fallen debris and the scrambling bodies of soldiers. He was calm in the way that deep water is calm, not still exactly but settled. Like the surface of something that has a great deal going on underneath and chooses not to show it. Huang looked back at him once with an expression that mixed disbelief with desperate hope. "You actually know how to use that thing?" "The rifle. Yes." "How good are you?" Noah didn't answer. He was already looking up, already calculating angles, already doing the work that his hands remembered, even when his mind tried to forget it. The elevated position at the drainage junction was a concrete platform about 12 feet above the road, part of an old flood control system, cracked and weathered, but solid. It gave a partial line of sight to the northeastern ridgeline. Not perfect, but workable. Noah opened the case. The rifle inside was old. Not antique old in the way that good tools get old, which is to say, worn exactly where it should be worn and precise exactly where precision matters. A long-range precision rifle that had been maintained with obsessive care. Every surface clean. Every component moving with the smooth certainty of something that had been tended to not stored. Huang stared at it. "What is that?" "A conversation," Noah said. He began assembling it from muscle memory. His hands moved without hesitation. The stock, the scope, the bipod, each piece clicking into place with a quiet authority that made Huang take a half step back. "I'm going to have a conversation with their machine gun position. You're going to keep anyone from interrupting me." "You got it," Huang said, though his voice made it clear he wasn't entirely sure what he'd just agreed to. Noah stretched out on the platform, settled behind the scope, and took one long, slow breath. Downrange, the northeastern ridgeline spit fire. He could see the machine gun nest, now 2 operators well-positioned, protected on 3 sides by natural rock. They'd set up smart. Whoever was running this operation had done their homework. Noah did his. Wind 6 knots left to right shifting. Distance he estimated, measured, adjusted. The elevation required a correction. The angle required another. He didn't rush. He never rushed. Around him the battle was loud and close and terrible. Men were shouting. Weapons were firing. Somewhere to his left, someone was saying, stay with me," in the specific tone that means the person they're talking to might not. Noah breathed out. Halfway. Held. The crosshairs settled. He squeezed. The crack of the shot was sharp and clean, and for a fraction of a second one of those strange pauses that happen sometimes in firefights when the noise catches itself, there was near silence. Then the machine gun on the ridgeline went quiet. Huang's head came up. "Did you—" "Spotting the second position," Noah said. His voice hadn't changed. He was already moving the scope, already recalculating, already somewhere down the valley in his mind. "You got it with one shot. From here." "Don't talk to me while I'm working," Noah said, and he wasn't unkind about it, but he was firm in the way that a surgeon is firm when someone reaches for an instrument at the wrong moment. Huang closed his mouth. The second shot came 90 seconds later. A mortar team that had been setting up on the far southern ridge, positioning themselves for what would have been a devastating angle on the platoon, simply ceased to exist as an organized threat. One moment, they were moving with purpose. The next, they were not. Down at the road, Captain Cole heard the second rifle crack and felt something change in the air. The mortar position had been invisible to him, he hadn't even known it was there. But the immediate reduction in coordinated enemy movement from the south told him something had happened, something significant. Briggs appeared at his shoulder. "Sir, did someone just—" "Reed, the supply clerk, apparently not." Cole watched the southern approach where enemy movement had become noticeably less organized. "Get me a status on our flanks." And Briggs moved. Cole stood for a moment and looked toward the drainage junction where he could see barely at this angle the flat, still shape of a man prone behind a long rifle. He thought about the case, the way it had clicked open, the worn latches. "I used to be something else." "Who are you, Reed?" he said quietly to no one. What happened over the next 20 minutes would be described differently by every soldier who survived to describe it. Sergeant Marcus Webb would say later, "It was like someone turned down the volume on a speaker. The pressure just started dropping. Every time it felt like they were going to coordinate a push, something would break. A key position would go silent, a team leader would go down, and the rest of them would hesitate, and in a fight like that, hesitation gets you killed. Private Torres would say, "I didn't know what was happening at first. I just knew that we were dying, and then we weren't dying as fast. And then someone said it was the supply guy on the platform, and I thought they were joking, but you could hear the rifle every minute or so, just this one clean shot, and every time something over there stopped working." Corporal Huang would say nothing for a while. When he finally did talk about it, he said only, "I watched him work. I was right there. And I want you to understand, it wasn't rage, it wasn't heroism. The man was calm, he was just working, like he was somewhere quiet doing something he understood. And I think that was the most frightening and most reassuring thing I've ever seen in my life." At 09:23:36 minutes into the ambush, Noah reached a momentary pause. No clear shot. Enemy repositioning. He used the pause to roll onto his back, reach into his vest, and touch the folded letter through the fabric. He didn't take it out. He just touched it. "Don't be boring while I'm at school. Do something exciting." He almost laughed. The sound that came out was quiet and short, and not quite a laugh, and not quite the other thing. And he rolled back, found the scope, started again. Below him in the chaos of the road, he could see Captain Cole moving his men, repositioning, adapting, using the breathing room that each shot created. The man was a good commander. He responded fast. He was making the most of every second Noah gave him. Just keep giving him seconds, Noah told himself. That's all you have to do. 1 second at a time. He had 22 rounds left. He began choosing which seconds were worth the most. At 09:31, something changed. Cole felt it before he understood it, a shift in the nature of the enemy fire, a change in the rhythm that told him something had shifted on their side. He'd been in enough firefights to know what an enemy in control sounded like and what an enemy responding to damage sounded like. For the first 30 minutes, the enemy had sounded like the former. Now they sounded like the latter. "Briggs," Cole grabbed his sergeant. "They're reacting. They've lost their coordination structure. Who have we lost?" Briggs's face was dust gray. "Torres has a through and through on his right arm still functional. Garza's got a head contusion in and out. Medic says keep him still. Morrison." He paused. "Morrison didn't make it, sir." Cole held that for a second. Soldier's grief acknowledged file move. "Who have they lost?" "Hard to count from here, sir, but their command element on the ridge took serious hits. Whatever Reed's doing up there." "How much time do we need?" "Reinforcements, if they figured out we're missing maybe 30 minutes out, maybe 35. So we need 30 minutes. "Sir." Cole looked at the drainage platform. He could see Huang up there and the shape of Reed behind the rifle, still patient, unrelenting. 30 minutes. He keyed his radio, still jammed, still dead, and then he did the only thing he could do. He turned to his men and started giving orders. "Listen up. We're holding this line. Every position, every man you hold, and you make them pay for every inch. We are not leaving this road. You hear me?" And something happened that Cole hadn't entirely expected. His men, exhausted, bloodied, outnumbered, answered him. Not with words, with fire. With a new intensity that rose from the ground like something that had been waiting. They answered with the sound of men who had decided they were not done yet. Mayor. Cole didn't know exactly when it happened, the moment when the platoon shifted from surviving to fighting. But he would come to believe later that it happened because of the platform. Because of the man on it. Because every time the enemy surged and it felt like the end was coming, one clean shot would fire from that position, and something important on the other side would stop working, and the men below would find another 30 seconds of belief. You can do extraordinary things with 30 seconds of belief. You can do extraordinary things with a man who refuses to stop. At 09:38, Huang heard Noah make a sound. Not a word, not a cry, Just a sound, quiet, involuntary, the sound of a man processing something his body registered before his mind did. Huang looked. There was blood on Noah's left arm. A fragment rock debris, maybe a round that had skipped and caught him, had opened a cut along his forearm. Not fatal, not even serious probably. But it was bleeding, and Huang could see that Noah was aware of it and had filed it exactly where Cole filed Morrison acknowledge file move. Read. You're hit. Noted. We should. How many shooters do you have left? Huang blinked. What? Shooters. On the road. How many capable fighters is the captain working with? Huang looked down, counted. Maybe 35. 30 with the wounded. Noah adjusted his position, accommodating the arm without surrendering the sight picture. Then I'm fine, he said. Keep watching my left. Huang watched his left. Below them, the battle burned on. What? And Noah Reed, supply clerk, single father, quiet man. Nobody lay still in the dust and the noise and the heat, and he kept working, and he kept choosing which seconds mattered most, and he did not stop. He didn't stop because he couldn't afford to. He didn't stop because 30 feet below him were men who had families too. And he didn't stop because in his vest pocket pressed against his chest, a little girl with careful handwriting was waiting for her father to come home. He didn't stop. At 0941, Noah ran out of easy shots. That was how he thought about it. Not that the enemy had gotten smarter, though they had, but that the geometry had changed. The surviving enemy commanders had figured out sometime in the last few minutes that something unusual was happening on that drainage platform. They'd started moving differently. Shorter rushes. Using cover they hadn't bothered with before. Keeping their command personnel back out of sight, letting subordinates take the exposed positions. They were adapting to him, which meant they were afraid of him, which meant he was doing his job. Noah made a small adjustment to his position, accommodating the burning in his left arm, and started recalculating. If they were using cover, he needed to change what he was targeting. Not the men themselves, not anymore. He needed to target their decisions, their options, the things that allowed them to feel safe. He put his next round through the rock formation that 3 enemy soldiers were using as primary cover on the western approach. The round didn't hit any of them. It wasn't supposed to. It hit the rock in exactly the place that would make that position psychologically untenable, a spot that demonstrated clearly and without ambiguity that whoever was behind that rifle could reach them anywhere they thought they were protected. They moved, scrambled, broke their disciplined formation, and scattered. And Captain Cole, reading the chaos 30 feet below, immediately sent 8 men into the gap. Briggs's voice rose over the firefight. Northwest push, move, move, move. Noah watched it unfold in the scope and thought, good, Commander. He sees it fast. He found his next target and kept working. It was 0943. They needed 26 more minutes. He had 17 rounds. He started doing the math on how to make 17 rounds last 26 minutes, and the math was uncomfortable, but he'd worked with worse numbers before in places that officially didn't exist. In years, he'd spent a long time learning not to think about. The math was workable. Everything was workable if you broke it down small enough. 1 second at a time, he told himself again. Give them 1 more second. Chun. Below him, Corporal Huang fired twice at a muzzle flash in the tree line and then called out, Reed, they're trying to flank us. Far left. 2, maybe 3. I see them, Noah said. He didn't. He found them in the next 4 seconds, which was close enough. 2 fighters moving fast and low through the brush, trying to get an angle on the platform. Smart. If they got that angle, the platform was done, and Noah Reed became the problem instead of the solution. He shifted, calculated, fired once. One of the 2 figures in the brush stopped moving. The other one reversed course so fast he nearly fell. Left flank is clear, Noah said. Huang exhaled hard. How did you? Huang. Yeah. How many rounds do you have left? A pause. The sound of a magazine check. 1 full, 1 partial. Maybe 30 rounds total. Make them count. Don't fire unless you have a clean target. Understood. Then quieter. Reed, who are you? Noah didn't answer for a moment. He was tracking a new position, a radio operator he'd spotted moving between 2 pieces of cover on the far ridge, someone trying to restore their communication structure, which was exactly the kind of thing that would make the next 25 minutes dramatically worse. I'm a supply clerk, he said finally. That's not what I mean. I know. He fired. The radio operator stopped moving. Enemy communications remained disrupted. I know, he said again softer, and that was all he said. Down on the road, the battle had shifted into something different. Not a rout, not a victory, but a negotiation. The enemy had numbers, and they had organization, and they had been told presumably that this was supposed to be clean and fast. It was neither. The longer it ran, the more their certainty eroded. The more their certainty eroded, the sloppier their execution became, and the sloppier their execution became, the more Captain Cole could work with. Cole was good at working with imperfect situations. He'd built a career on it. What he hadn't built a career on was working with a ghost. And because that was what Noah Reed was becoming in his mind. A ghost. An asset. A solution to a problem that had no right to have a solution. Cole kept glancing at the platform, that flat, still shaped the occasional crack of a shot. Always measured, always spaced, never wasted. And he kept trying to reconcile it with the man who'd handed him supply manifests 2 weeks ago without making eye contact. Supply clerks don't shoot like that. Supply clerks don't read a battlefield like that. Who are you? Read at 0949. Cole got partial radio function back. A narrow window, degraded signal 30 seconds at most before the jamming reasserted. He grabbed it. Kessler Base, this is Cole Recon 7. We are under heavy contact at grid. He rattled off the coordinates. Request immediate QRF over. Static. Then broken. Cole, confirm your how many over. 160 plus enemy 41 personnel, 12 casualties. He was guessing on the enemy number, but he wasn't guessing low. We need QRF now over. More static. A fragment, 22 minutes. The window closed. Cole stood with the dead radio in his hand and processed what he'd heard. 22 minutes. Not 30. Not 35. Someone back at base had gotten worried early, which meant the QRF had rolled before the expected check-in time, which meant someone was looking out for them. 22 minutes. He turned to Briggs. 22 minutes. Briggs closed his eyes briefly, the way a man does when he receives news that he needs a moment to believe. 22 minutes. Pass it to the men, quietly. No celebrations. I don't want the enemy knowing we have a clock, but pass it. He looked at the platform. 22 minutes. He needed Noah Reed to hold for 22 more minutes. He started to calculate whether that was possible, and then he stopped calculating because he realized he was doing something he'd never done before in 14 years of military service. He was depending on a supply clerk. No, that wasn't right. He was depending on whoever Noah Reed actually was. And he still didn't know who that was. At 0952, the answer started coming in pieces. 952, It came through Sergeant First Class Harlan Price, who was the oldest man in the unit. 53 years old, career Army, the kind of soldier who'd been everywhere and seen everything, and whose opinion Cole had learned to weight heavily. Price pulled Cole aside behind the burned-out Humvee with a look on his face that Cole had never seen there before. "Sir," Price said, "I need to tell you something about Reed." Cole looked at him. Price was not a man who spoke unnecessarily. "Talk." "I recognized him," Price said. "When he opened that case. I recognized the way he set up, the way he laid out. I thought I was wrong because it's been years and the man looks different, but then I watched him work and Price stopped. He was choosing his words carefully, which was also unusual. Sir, about 7-8 years ago, there was a classified long-range reconnaissance program, Deep Black. Most people in the service never heard of it. The ones who did were told very clearly not to talk about it. Cole waited. The program trained operators to a standard that didn't officially exist. Price continued. Long-range precision, extreme distance, moving targets, adverse conditions under fire. They weren't snipers exactly. They were something more specific than that. They were problem solvers. The kind of problem solvers you deploy when nothing else will work, and you can't afford for anything else to work. He looked at the platform. They called the program Iron Veil. Cole said nothing. I knew one of the Iron Veil operators, Price said. Met him twice briefly at a forward operating base I can't name in a country that officially had no U.S. presence. Quiet man, younger than he looked. Nobody would have picked him out of a crowd. Price paused. His name was Reed. The gunfire continued around them, neither man acknowledging it. You're sure? Cole said. I'm sure of the name, and I'm sure of the way he works, Price said. I'd need to see his face clearly to be certain. It's the same man, but sir. He glanced up at the platform again. What are the odds? Cole followed his gaze. The shape behind the rifle was still, focused, relentlessly, quietly professional. What happened to the program? Cole asked. Decommissioned. Officially because of budget restructuring. Unofficially because... Price stopped. Because of what happened on the last operation. I don't have details. I have rumors. But the rumors included significant casualties and a mission outcome that nobody wanted to put on paper. And Reed. If he's the same man, he left. That's all I know. He left the service. I heard later secondhand that one of the Iron Veil operators lost his wife and withdrew from everything, turned in everything, and walked away. Price looked at Cole directly. If that's Reed up there, sir, he has a daughter, a little girl. That's the only thing I know about his life after Iron Veil. Cole absorbed this. He looked at the platform. He looked at the battle unfolding below it, where his men were fighting with a determination that had something specific fueling it, something that had arrived in a rifle case 40 minutes ago. He never intended to be here, Cole said. It wasn't a question. No, sir. I don't imagine he did. Cole thought about the supply manifests, the early mornings, the way Noah Reed moved through the base as though trying to take up as little space as possible. He thought about the worn latches on the rifle case smoothed from handling, which meant the case had been opened regularly, not just stored, but maintained, checked, kept ready. Not by a man who had left everything behind, by a man who had kept one thing. Just one. Just in case. 20 minutes, Briggs called out, reminding them they had a clock. Cole straightened. Price, not a word of this to the men, not now. Understood, sir. After, if we get an after. Yes, sir. Cole moved back into the fight, and he carried what Price had told him like a stone in his chest, and he thought about a man who had put down a life's worth of violence and tried to build something quiet and small in its place. A pickup that burned oil, a little girl peanut butter on the left side of the bread, and had it follow him here anyway. Into the mountains, into the fire. Into the moment when a captain shouts a question he doesn't expect answered and a rifle case clicks open. At 09:58, the enemy made their first serious push on the platform. It wasn't subtle. They'd identified the position it would have been difficult not to after 40 minutes of shots from the same location, and they'd assembled a small assault element specifically tasked with neutralizing it. 4 fighters moving under the cover of a sustained suppressive fire from the ridgeline that suddenly and noticeably increased in volume. The increase in fire was the tell. Noah heard it and understood it before he saw the assault element moving. Huang, he said. I hear it, Huang said. He was already moving, repositioning, getting his rifle up. 2 left, 2 right, Noah said. They'll converge. Don't engage until they're in the open. You sure they'll break cover? They have to. The approach geometry doesn't give them a choice. Noah was calm in that specific way that Huang had come to understand in the last hour meant the situation was serious but manageable. When Noah's voice changed, when it got slightly flatter, slightly quieter, that was when to worry. "Wait for my shot." Huang waited. The suppressive fire from the ridgeline peaked. The assault element moved. Noah fired twice in 4 seconds. 2 separate positions, 2 separate targets. The timing precise enough that the second shot came before anyone on the other side had fully processed the first. The left pair of the assault element collapsed before reaching the gap in cover. The right pair froze. Looked. Made the calculation that soldiers make when they suddenly understand they are exposed and their partners are down and the math has changed. They went back. The suppressive fire from the ridgeline dropped in both volume and precision. The operators there were rattled, reacting to what had just happened to their assault element. Cole's men used the drop to push forward on the western side, gaining 30 meters of ground. 2 threats neutralized, Noah said. Huang put his hand on the concrete platform for a moment, steadying himself. His hand was shaking slightly, and he looked at it like it belonged to someone else. "How many rounds do you have left?" A pause. "Enough." Huang understood from the way Noah said it that the answer was not as confident as the word made it sound. "Read." "I'm fine, Huang." "You're bleeding pretty good." "It's not structural." "That's a weird way to say you're okay." "I'm okay," Noah said. "Keep watching left." At 10:03, with 15 minutes on the clock, something happened that nobody expected. Noah heard it before he understood it, a sound different from the firefight, specific and mechanical, coming from the road below. He shifted his scope without moving his body and found the source, and felt for the first time in this entire engagement a specific and targeted fear. Nemo, an armored vehicle, moving up the approach road from the south, using the tree line as partial concealment. Not a tank, something lighter, but mounted with a weapons system that would change the entire equation of the fight if it reached a position to engage the platoon directly. The platform would be gone in 30 seconds if that vehicle got where it was trying to go. The platoon's cover positions would be gone in 60. And Cole had nothing. No anti-armor, no RPG, capable of stopping it at range. Nothing except 17 rounds from a long-range precision rifle, and a man who was already injured and running on math and memory and whatever it was he carried in his chest pocket. Noah made the calculation in approximately 4 seconds. The vehicle had a vision port, a narrow one but real, designed for the operator to see forward while maintaining armor protection. At this range, in these conditions, hitting a vision port the size of a dinner plate was not a reasonable shot. It was the kind of shot that existed on the edge of what was physically possible, the kind that required not just skill, but something harder to define, that specific quality of absolute stillness that lives in the space between breathing and not breathing, between human and instrument. Noah had been in that space before. He'd tried very hard not to go back to it. "Huang," he said. "I see it," Huang said, and his voice had gone quiet in a way that meant he understood exactly how bad the vehicle was. "Get on the radio, get Cole's attention. Tell him to move his men east off the road now. Best cover available." "What are you going to do?" Noah settled. Let his body become still in the way that Huang had watched him become still. Before every significant shot, a completeness of focus that looked from the outside like a man who had stopped being a man and become a fact of physics. "I'm going to have a conversation," Noah said. "You said that before. You said that about the machine gun." It worked, didn't it? Huang grabbed the radio relay and started talking fast. Below, Cole's voice rose immediately, sharp and commanding, and men started moving east with the specific urgency of soldiers who trust their commander's orders even when they don't understand them. Noah breathed, calculated. The vehicle was moving at approximately 15 kilometers per hour on an uneven road surface, which meant the vision port was not stationary. It moved, slightly unpredictably within a small range. He needed to time it to a moment of relative stability, a flat section of road, a reduced speed, a momentary pause in the vehicle's pitch. He waited. The vehicle hit a flat section, slowed fractionally. Noah fired. D. The sound that followed was not an explosion. It was something more specific. The sharp metallic result of a precision round finding a precision gap, and then the secondary sounds of a vehicle losing controlled navigation. The armored vehicle veered hard left, clipped the edge of the road embankment, and stopped. It did not reverse. It did not continue forward. Its weapon system did not engage. The vehicle was done. Huang stood completely still for 3 seconds. Then he said very quietly, "That was not a real shot." "It was real enough," Noah said. "That was not possible." A lot of things that happened today weren't supposed to be possible. Noah's voice was slightly rougher now, not from emotion from the arm, from the cumulative weight of the last hour. He was burning through something that wasn't ammunition, and Huang could hear it. "That's the point of today, I think." Somewhere below, he heard Cole's voice raised, urgent, commanding. The men were repositioning, using the moment, finding new ground. Using every second Noah was buying them. He had 11 rounds left. He had 11 minutes on the clock. He found the scope again and started working. At 1008, Briggs reached Cole with a piece of information that landed like a physical blow. "Sir Morrison's position, they've pulled back from it. The northwest corridor is open. If the enemy figures that out..." Cole didn't wait for the rest of the sentence. He was already moving, already pulling 2 soldiers with him, already thinking 3 steps ahead. Morrison's position, held by Morrison alone, until Morrison wasn't there to hold it anymore, was a gap in the defensive line that an organized enemy push would exploit immediately and brutally. But as Cole moved to fill it, something else happened. The organized enemy push didn't come. Because at 1008, with Cole racing to seal Morrison's gap, Noah Reed, with 11 rounds and an injured arm and 11 minutes on the clock, looked through his scope and saw the enemy commander. He recognized command personnel the way experienced operators do, not by uniform or insignia necessarily, but by behavior. The way a man moves when other men look to him. The way information flows toward him. The way he positions himself relative to his assets. It's a specific kind of gravitational center, and if you've spent years learning to read battlefields, you learn to find it. Noah found it. The commander was staying back smart, careful, using his subordinates as a screen. But at 1008 he made a small mistake. He moved to a position that gave him better visibility of the northeastern approach, which meant better visibility of his advancing elements, which meant that for approximately 20 seconds he was visible in a narrow window between 2 pieces of cover. 20 seconds. Noah had been working with smaller windows all day. He settled, breathed. Let the world narrow down to the scope, the target, the mathematics of air and distance and human patience. He fired. What followed was not an immediate collapse of the enemy attack. That wasn't how it worked. Command structures don't evaporate instantly, they degrade. They fragment. The people who'd been taking orders start making independent decisions, and independent decisions made under fire by people who've just lost their coordination center are rarely the right ones. They're usually reactive, defensive, smaller. The enemy attack on Morrison's Gap never materialized. Not because Cole sealed it in time. He did barely, but that wasn't why. It was because the men who were supposed to execute that attack were suddenly working without a clear directive, and without clear direction, they defaulted to cover and survival rather than aggression. Cole sealed the gap and didn't know until much later how close it had been. At 10:12, Noah heard the helicopters. He heard them before he saw them. The distant mechanical heartbeat of rotor blades growing louder from the northeast, and something in his chest did something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not relief exactly. Something more complicated. The particular feeling of a man who has been holding a wall by himself, and hears finally that other hands are coming. He stayed behind the scope. He stayed, And because 10 minutes still existed between now and landing, and 10 minutes was enough time for everything to fall apart if the enemy made one concentrated push. He had 9 rounds. He had 10 minutes. He was not done. "Reed," Huang said. He'd heard the helicopters too. "They're coming." "I know." "You can stop." "Not yet." "Reed, you're—" Huang paused. "You look bad." "I'm fine." "Your arm." "Huang, I need you to watch left and stop telling me how I look." His voice was steady. The arm was not, but the voice was. Below, Cole had heard the helicopters too, and the effect on the men was immediate and visible. Not a collapse of discipline, but an inflation of it. That specific surge that comes when men who've been holding on understand that holding on has worked, that the distance has been crossed, that the impossible math has somehow come out positive. They pushed harder, fired with more precision, stopped conserving ammunition, and started spending it. The enemy, hearing the helicopters, made a different calculation. The calculation of men who understand that the tactical situation has just changed permanently and irreversibly. They started thinking about withdrawal. They weren't done. They still had numbers, still had positions, still had momentum in several sectors. But the calculus had shifted, and the best military minds on the other side of that valley knew it. The last 10 minutes were still going to cost something. Things of value were still going to be spent. But the outcome, for the first time since 0847, had a direction. Noah fired 3 more times in those 10 minutes. Each shot was deliberate, measured, chosen not for drama, but for effect. The specific points of pressure that kept the enemy from organizing a final push, kept them reactive and defensive, while Cole's men extended their gains and the sound of rotors grew from a distant heartbeat to a thunderous presence overhead. At 1019, the first helicopter came over the ridge. At 1021, QRF boots hit the ground. At 1022, Noah Reed fired his last round. He didn't know it was his last until he pulled the trigger and the rifle was empty, and for a moment, he just held the position, still breathing scope on the valley, and he counted what he'd spent and what remained, and understood that the math had improbably worked out exactly right. He'd needed 17 rounds to last 22 minutes. He'd had 17 rounds. He'd lasted 22 minutes. He rolled onto his back and looked at the sky. It was clear and blue and wide, and the sound of helicopters was everywhere now. And somewhere below, men were shouting things that sounded like relief, like survival, like the specific stunned gratitude of people who have just lived through something that should have killed them. Huang crouched beside him, looked at his arm, said nothing. Noah reached into his vest and touched the letter. "Don't be boring while I'm at school." He made the sound again, the short, quiet thing that wasn't quite a laugh. His eyes were wet. He didn't address that. "How many did we hold?" he asked. Huang understood what he was asking, not casualties, but position. "How much of the line held?" "All of it," Huang said. "Every position." "Sir, we held everything." Noah nodded, closed his eyes for a moment. "Good," he said. "That's good." Down on the road, Captain Cole stood with QRF commanders and tried to explain what had happened in the last 65 minutes, and found that the explanation he kept giving a supply clerk on a platform 17 rounds a rifle case with worn latches sounded like something a person invented when they couldn't explain the truth. But it was the truth. And somewhere at the back of the story, just now beginning to surface, was a name that had been classified for years, and a program that officially hadn't existed, and a man who had carried one rifle and one letter and used both of them today in ways nobody had expected. Harlan Price stood at Cole's shoulder and watched medics climb toward the drainage platform, and he said nothing out loud, but his expression said something specific. "I knew it." And Cole, watching the same thing, thought about worn latches and a little girl with careful handwriting, and understood that he was going to need answers. Real answers, full answers, before this was over. But the answers were going to have to wait. Because first a man needed a medic, and then a man needed to call his daughter. The story wasn't finished, not even close. But for the first time today, it felt like it was going to have an ending worth reaching. The medic's name was Corporal Yates, and he had been doing this job long enough to know the difference between a man who was hurt and a man who was done. Noah Reed was hurt, significantly. The wound on his left arm had gone deeper than it looked from a distance, and when Yates finally got his hands on it at 1:02:43 minutes after the QRF landed, he said something under his breath that he tried to keep Noah from hearing. Noah heard it. "How bad?" Noah asked. "Bad enough that you are done for today," Yates said. He worked fast, efficient, the movements of someone who'd done field dressing under worse conditions than this. "You need evac. You need a surgeon, not a field kit." "How long before that happens?" "Helicopters being cleared right now, 20 minutes, maybe less." Noah sat up. Yates put a hand on his chest. "Reed, I'm serious. You stay down." "I need to talk to the captain first." "You need to stay down first." Yates. Noah looked at him directly, and there was something in the look that made Yates's hand drop. Not aggression, not rank, something quieter and more final than either of those things. 20 minutes. Yates looked at him for a long moment. Then he finished the dressing, tied it tight enough to make Noah's jaw clench, and stepped back. 20 minutes, he said. "Then I'm carrying you to that helicopter myself." Noah got to his feet, took a breath, walked down from the platform. Cole met him at the bottom. They stood facing each other for a moment, and Cole thought again about what Price had told him. Ironvale, the classified program, the man who had walked away, and he looked at Noah Reed's face and tried to see it. Tried to see what was underneath the dust, and the exhaustion, and the controlled expression of a man who had just spent 65 minutes doing something that officially shouldn't have been possible. "You held it," Cole said. "We held it," Noah said. "Your men held it. I just—" "Reed, sir, don't do that." Cole's voice was quiet. "Don't minimize it. Not to me. Not right now." He looked at the arm, at the dried blood below the fresh dressing. "Price told me about Ironvale." Something moved across Noah's face. Brief, controlled, gone before it fully arrived. "Price talks too much. Price respects you too much not to tell me." Cole held his ground. "I need to know, and I need you to be straight with me. Was any of what happened today reactive? Or did you know what you were doing from the first shot?" Noah was quiet for a moment. Around them, the QRF was moving through the area, securing, assessing, doing the organized work of soldiers who'd arrived after the crisis and were now responsible for the aftermath. Briggs was somewhere behind Cole doing a head count. Yates was moving back toward the casualty collection point. The helicopters were still running their sound, a constant presence. "I always know what I'm doing," Noah said finally. "That's not arrogance. That's just how it works. If you stop knowing what you're doing, people die." "That's what I thought." Cole looked at the valley, looked at the road, the burned Humvee, the scattered evidence of 65 minutes of a fight that shouldn't have gone the way it did. "I'm going to need a full debrief when you're cleared medically." "Understood. And Reed?" Cole stopped. Started again. "Your daughter. Someone back at Kessler should call the school. Tell them you're okay, in case they've heard anything on the news, in case she—" Noah's expression changed. Not much, but enough. "Her teacher's name is Mrs. Gallagher," he said. "Tell her to tell Emma that Dad's fine, and he'll be home on schedule." He paused. "Tell her not to make it sound like a big deal. Emma worries." Cole nodded. "I'll make the call myself. Thank you, sir." Cole watched Noah walk toward the casualty collection point, and he thought 20 years of service, 14 years of leading men in difficult places, and he had never not once seen anything like what he'd watched from the drainage platform today. He'd need to write it up. He'd need to put it in language that made sense on paper, that fit into categories and formats and official frameworks. He had no idea how to do that yet. "Shande," he turned back to his men. There was still work to do. It was 10:31. The immediate crisis was over. The next one started at 10:47. It started with a radio call that Cole almost didn't take because he was in the middle of a casualty report. The QRF commander, Major Stearns, pulled him aside with an expression that said the call was not optional. "Cole," Stearns said, handing him the handset. "It's intelligence. They say it's urgent." Cole took it, listened. And as he listened, his expression went through several changes that the men near him would later describe as alarming. When he handed the handset back, he stood still for a moment. "Sir." Briggs was at his shoulder. "The force that hit us today," Cole said quietly. "It wasn't a local cell. It wasn't opportunistic. Sir, intelligence has been tracking a coordinated operation across the entire Blackstone Valley corridor. 3 simultaneous ambushes. 2 succeeded." He looked at the valley, at the ridgeline, at the drainage platform still visible above the road. "We were the 3rd. Briggs absorbed this. "So they knew we were coming. They knew our route, they knew our timing, they knew our communication frequencies well enough to jam them precisely." Cole's voice was controlled in the specific way of a man controlling it deliberately. "This wasn't an ambush, Briggs. This was an assassination. This whole unit was supposed to be gone before noon." Silence between them filled by wind and helicopter rotors. "And the fact that we're not," Briggs said slowly, "is because of a supply clerk with a rifle case." "Yes. And now intelligence knows that the operation failed." "Yes. Which means whoever planned it knows it failed." Cole looked at him. "And they know why." Briggs understood immediately. "They'll come back." "Not for the unit," Cole said. "The unit's been extracted, reinforced, the position is secure. They can't touch us here." He paused. "But they know there was one asset that changed the outcome. One variable they didn't account for. And in the intelligence report I just received..." He stopped. "Sir, Noah Reed's name is in it, his real name, his history. Someone on our side with access to classified files has been talking to someone on the other side." He said it flatly without inflection, because the alternative to flatness was something he couldn't afford right now. Reed's identity as an Iron Veil operator has been compromised, which means he's not just a casualty risk, he's a target. Briggs stared at him. "Where is he now?" Cole was already moving. "Casualty collection point. Move!" They moved fast, and they weren't fast enough. Because at 10:49, 2 minutes before Cole reached the casualty collection point, Noah Reed was gone. Not evacuated. Not moved by medics. Gone. Yates was standing there looking at the empty space where Noah had been with the expression of a man trying to reconstruct a sequence of events that didn't fully make sense to him yet. "He was here," Yates said. "I was 10 feet away. I turned around to get a second dressing kit, and when I turned back..." "Which direction?" Cole demanded. Yates pointed north, toward the valley, toward the high ground overlooking the road where 400 meters away and 60 feet above everything else, the broken remains of an old stone watchtower stood against the ridge. Iron Watchtower. It was on their maps. Pre-war construction, partially destroyed, structurally compromised. It had been noted in their mission briefing as a terrain feature to be aware of. Nobody had flagged it as a tactical position because nobody had thought they would need one. Cole looked at it, looked at the sightlines it offered. Understood with the cold clarity of a man who'd spent 40 minutes watching a ghost work exactly what Noah Reed had understood. "He saw something," Cole said. "Sir, he saw something from the casualty point. Something we haven't seen yet." Cole raised his binoculars, scanned the southern approaches, scanned the tree line. And he decided that the platform wasn't high enough. He found it 30 seconds later. Movement. Organized, deliberate moving through the southern tree line with the specific discipline of a force that had regrouped, reoriented, and come back with a different objective. Not the chaotic assault of the earlier engagement. Something more focused. Stearns Cole shouted across the compound. South tree line. QRF, south, now. And he started running toward the tower. At 1:05:1, Noah reached the base of Iron Watchtower. He'd seen the movement from the casualty point at 10:48, the specific shimmer of a disciplined force moving through brush, the pattern that most people wouldn't recognize as threat, unless they'd spent years learning to read it. He'd recognized it in approximately 4 seconds, and in the 4 seconds after that, he'd made a decision that he knew was not medically advisable, tactically approved, or personally smart. He'd made it anyway, because the tower gave a sightline that nothing else in the terrain provided, because the QRF was positioned to respond but needed 30 seconds of warning they wouldn't get without an elevated position. Because 30 seconds, as Noah Reed had demonstrated repeatedly today, was enough to save lives if someone was willing to spend themselves to create it. He carried the rifle. He'd kept it through the dressing, through the walk down, through every moment at the casualty point. Some habits are too deep to break. Some tools don't get put down until the work is done. The tower was structurally wrong. He knew it from the first step inside. The floor shifted under his weight in ways that said the base had been compromised, probably by the same engagement that had taken out the upper third of the structure. The stairs that remained were stone old uneven, and he climbed them with his right hand on the wall and his left arm useless below the elbow, numb from Yates's dressing, but functional enough to hold the rifle if he needed it. He needed it. Badges. He reached the upper platform, what remained of it, a partial floor with a gap, where the eastern wall had collapsed at 1053 and immediately dropped into position, because what he saw through the scope confirmed everything he'd suspected. Not a ragged collection of fighters, a coordinated assault element. 80, maybe 90 men moving in 3 columns with clear tactical structure using the QRF's extraction activity as cover. They'd timed it. They'd waited for the moment when Kessler's reinforcements would be focused on accounting for casualties and securing the immediate perimeter, and they'd come back through the south with a new objective. And the new objective, Noah understood as he tracked the lead element's movement toward the road, was not the unit. The lead element was moving directly toward the casualty collection point. Toward the wounded. He pressed the radio transmitter on his vest, the emergency channel, the one that cut through standard jamming protocols because it operated on a frequency most jamming equipment didn't bother to target. Cole, south approach, 90 plus 3 columns ETA to casualty point 4 minutes. They're going for the wounded. Static. Then Cole's voice, rough and close. Reed, where are you? Elevated. I have eyes on them. Get Stearns moving south now, and get your men between the approach and the casualty point. Reed, the tower is not. I know what the tower is. Get Stearns moving, sir. You have 3 minutes 50. A pause. The kind of pause that a commander makes when he understands that the situation has overtaken the argument. Stearns. Cole's voice moving away from the radio. South now, max speed. Noah settled behind the scope. His arm was fire from the elbow to the shoulder. He had no rounds. He'd fired the last one at 1022. The rifle in his hands was at this moment technically a very expensive and well-maintained club. But they didn't know that. He found the lead element's command figure, the same behavioral tells, the same gravitational center he'd learned to read today, and he did something that was either very smart or very desperate, depending on how the next 3 minutes went. He shifted his position. Deliberately. Visibly. Let the scope glass catch light for a fraction of a second, in a way that a well-trained observer on the southern approach would notice. He was not hiding. He was being seen. He was saying, I am here. I am watching. I am the thing that already cost you an operation today. Come and find out if it's worth trying again. The effect was not immediate, but it was real. He watched it ripple through the lead element, a hesitation, a check, a fractional slowing of the advance as the command figure communicated something to the people around him. The columns lost a degree of their precision. Individuals started looking up, looking at the tower, calculating. 30 seconds. Noah had just bought 30 seconds. At 1056, Cole reached the base of the tower. He didn't go in. There wasn't time, and he had no way to help from inside. He positioned himself at the base with Price and 2 QRF soldiers, and looked up at the partial platform 60 feet above him, where the shape of a man he barely understood was doing something that he could feel, but not fully see. His radio crackled. "Stearns. South element moving. We see the approach. Reed's intel is confirmed. We have eyes on 3 columns. Opening engagement in 90 seconds. "Copy," Cole said. And then looking up at the tower, "Reed QRF is engaged. 90 seconds. Noah's voice came back, and Cole heard something in it that he hadn't heard all day. Not fear. Something more controlled than fear. "Copy that. I'll hold their attention." "Reed, what do you mean you'll hold their—" But Noah had released the transmitter. At 1057, the tower shuddered. Whoa. Not from external impact. From internal failure. The compromised base taking the additional weight and movement of a man at the top, finally expressing its structural opinion loudly and physically. The floor of the upper platform dropped 2 inches on the eastern side, and Noah felt it through his entire body, the sudden wrongness of a structure deciding it was done. He didn't move. Moving would redistribute weight unpredictably. He stayed perfectly still and assessed not the fear, because fear was not useful, but the structural reality. The eastern side was compromised. The western side still held. The platform had probably 2-3 more minutes before the eastern section went entirely. He had 90 seconds of cover fire coming from QRF. He needed to hold the southern assault element's attention for 90 seconds. He could do this. He pressed the transmitter. "Cole. Here. The tower is going to come down." A silence. Brief. Then, "How long?" "Enough. I just need you to know." "Reed, get down. Now. We'll find another." "There isn't another way. The angle from here is the only thing holding their command element's attention. The second I move, they reorganize and push, and Stearns doesn't have the geometry to stop them before they reach the casualty point." He said it without drama, the way he'd said everything today as a fact, as a calculation, as the result of math he'd already done. 90 seconds, sir. That's all I need." Cole stood at the base of the tower with his hand tight on the radio and his jaw tight, and he said nothing for 3 seconds that felt much longer. "You better be right about the math," he said finally. "I'm always right about the math." "Reed. 70 seconds now, sir. Let Stearns work." Bow. Cole released the transmitter. Looked at Price. Price looked back at him with an expression that was not reassurance and not despair, but something in between the face of a man who has seen extraordinary things and understood that they come with extraordinary costs. "He knows what he's doing," Price said quietly. "I know he does," Cole said. "That's not what I'm worried about." At 1058, the platform shifted again. This time, it wasn't subtle. A full section of the eastern floor dropped away completely, and Noah had approximately 1 second to respond. He threw his weight left away from the collapse, and his right hand found a piece of remaining wall and held. And for one moment, he was half suspended over a 60-foot drop, with his injured arm screaming, and the rifle clutched to his chest, and the sound of the structure continuing its failure directly beneath him. He pulled, got his feet under him, found stability on a section of floor that was still for the moment refusing to quit. He was breathing hard. That was new. He'd been controlled all day, all of it breath and heart rate and the interior temperature of his mind. Now he was breathing hard, and his hands were not entirely steady, and the fear not of dying specifically, but of failing, of not getting to 90 seconds of the wounded at the casualty point, who had survived this long because of what he'd done, and who needed 30 more seconds of his attention. That fear was present and real, and he acknowledged it and kept working. He got back behind the scope. He found the command figure in the southern assault element, still hesitating, still calculating the tower, still unsure. Noah steadied, stopped breathing, held. He thought about Emma. Not the letter, not the words. Her face. The specific expression she made when she was worried about something. The small line between her eyebrows, the way she pressed her lips together, the way she tried to look braver than she felt. She got that from him. He'd seen it in photographs, the resemblance, and it always broke something open in his chest when he thought about it. She was in school right now, in Mrs. Gallagher's class, learning something probably that seemed important and was probably about fractions or state capitals. She didn't know about this valley. She didn't know about this tower. She didn't know that her father was 60 feet above a collapsing floor, injured out of ammunition, holding a sight line through sheer presence. She didn't need to know. She just needed him to finish the math. He held the position. The tower shook. He held. Well, yes. The arm burned like something had been inserted into it that wasn't supposed to be there. He held. The eastern section gave another 12 inches. The floor beneath his chest sloped at an angle that was becoming geometrically unkind. He held. And at 1059, the QRF opened up on the southern approach. The effect was immediate. The southern assault element, which had been pausing calibrating, held in suspension partly by the presence of something in the tower that they'd learned to respect today, suddenly had a much more immediate problem to deal with than the figure on the platform. Stearns had positioned well. The QRF fire hit the lead column with precision and weight, and the organized three-column advance fractured immediately into something reactive and defensive. The command figure, who had been looking at the tower, looked at his own people instead. The threat index of the tower dropped. The threat index of the QRF went to critical. They chose the QRF, as any rational force would. Noah exhaled. He pressed the transmitter. Cole, they've broken to engage QRF. Casualty point is clear. Cole's voice came back fast. Copy. Reed, get down. Now. That tower. Coming down. Noah confirmed. And then the transmitter was unnecessary, because the tower made its final decision with considerable authority. He moved in the 3 seconds he had. Down from the platform, the stairs, the compromised base that was now actively expressing its structural failure in ways that were loud and physical and non-negotiable. He moved fast, not the controlled, measured pace of a man behind a scope, but the raw physical urgency of a man with one useful arm and a 60-foot drop behind him, and approximately nothing left in his reserves but the specific stubbornness of someone who has a daughter to get home to. He hit the ground outside the tower at the same moment the upper platform came down. The sound was enormous. Stone old mortar, decades of water damage finally releasing the eastern section, taking the western with it in the way that structural failures cascade. It came down behind him close enough that the dust and debris caught him, knocked him off his feet, sent him rolling into the dirt at Cole's boots. Cole grabbed him, both hands, pulled him away from the collapse radius, and Noah let himself be pulled, and for the first time all day, he didn't fight the help. They ended up on the ground together, Cole's hands on Noah's shoulders. Noah sitting in the dirt with his back against Cole's chest, both of them covered in tower dust, both of them breathing hard. The tower finished falling. The sound settled into a ringing silence. Price stood 6 feet away with his hand over his mouth. The two QRF soldiers looked like they'd just watched something they couldn't categorize. Cole said nothing for a moment. Noah said nothing either. Then Cole said very quietly, "I told you to get down." "I got down," Noah said. "I meant before it collapsed." The math said I had enough time. The math was close. Noah looked at the pile of rubble where the tower had been, at the dust still settling, at the last section of wall standing at a 40-degree angle that suggested it was reconsidering its own decision. Close is fine, he said. Close counts. Cole looked at him. At the arm, the dust, the hands that were finally visibly shaking. At the rifle that Noah had somehow held onto through all of it, which was either professional habit or the action of a man who didn't know how to let go of the one thing he'd been holding all day. "Yates!" Cole called. Yates materialized in 20 seconds with the expression of a medic who had been betrayed and was prepared to be quite professional about it. He crouched beside Noah, looked at the arm, looked at the state of the dressing, looked at Noah's face, and said with remarkable restraint, "I told you 20 minutes." "It was 20 minutes," Noah said. "It was 34 minutes. Time moves differently when you're working." Yates started cutting away the old dressing with a focus that communicated volumes about his feelings without requiring any additional words. Noah let him. He tilted his head back, closed his eyes, and for the first time since 0847, he stopped counting. He stopped calculating distances and wind and remaining ammunition and minutes until reinforcement. He stopped reading the battlefield and tracking command figures and finding the geometry of cover and exposure. He stopped being the thing that held the line. He was just a man in the dirt, with a lot of hurt and a very angry medic. It was in its way a relief. Stearns's radio crackled at 11:04 with a confirmed report the Southern Assault Element had broken contact and was withdrawing. The QRF had hit them hard enough that reorganization wasn't viable. The Blackstone Valley corridor was for the moment secure. The fight was over. Not the aftermath, not the debrief. The investigation, the medical evaluation, the classified conversations about Iron Veil and compromised identities, and the intelligence leak that had put Noah Reed's name in the wrong hands. Not the formal accounting for everything that had happened since 0847, which was going to require a great deal of language that nobody had fully invented yet. But the fight itself was done. Cole sat on the ground next to Noah, and neither of them spoke for a while. Around them, the organized activity of a secured position continued, soldiers moving QRF, consolidating medics, working helicopters, staging. The background noise of aftermath, which is always quieter and stranger than the noise of what preceded it. Finally, Cole said, "Your daughter's name is Emma." Noah opened his eyes, looked at him. "Price told you that too. I made the call to her school while you were climbing the tower." Cole kept his voice even. "Mrs. Gallagher says Emma was in the middle of a math test." Something in Noah's face changed. Not broke changed. The way a thing that has been held under pressure for a long time changes when the pressure finally eases. Was she? Gallagher said she looked up from the test when she was told, and she said, and I'm quoting Gallagher directly. Cole paused. She said, "I knew Dad would be fine. He's really good at math." Noah Reed, who had been controlled and professional and precise for 117 minutes in conditions that should have been unsurvivable, made a sound that was not controlled and not professional, and was exactly what it sounded like. He pressed the back of his hand against his mouth. Yates pretended to be very focused on the dressing. Price turned away and looked at the valley. Cole sat beside the man he barely knew and said nothing, which was the right thing to say, and he kept saying it for the 2 minutes that Noah needed before he was done. Then Noah lowered his hand, breathed, looked at the sky. "She's better at math than I am," he said. "Always has been." "I believe it," Cole said. Yates tied off the new dressing with unnecessary firmness and stood up. "Helicopter. 5 minutes. And this time, Reed, I will actually carry you." Noah nodded. He looked at the rifle in the dirt beside him. He picked it up. Cole watched him hold it for a moment, this worn, precise, faithfully maintained thing that had been his one kept piece of a life he'd tried to leave, and then Noah laid it back down with the specific deliberateness of a man completing a task. Not discarding it, completing it. "I'll need to give a statement," he said. "You'll need surgery first," Cole said. "Then a statement." Then a statement. Cole stood, offered his hand. Noah took it, and Cole pulled him to his feet and they stood facing each other in the dust of a battle that had gone the way it had for reasons that Cole was still trying to find language for. "Read," Cole said. "Sir, whatever happens in the debrief, whatever the Army decides to do with what happened today." Cole held his gaze. "Your daughter's going to know her father didn't quit when quitting was the reasonable option." Noah said nothing for a moment. Then, "She already knows that." "Good," Cole said. "Then nothing today changed anything important." The helicopter came at 11:09. Yates was as good as his word. He didn't carry Noah, but he walked close enough that the offer was clear and non-negotiable. Noah walked under his own power, which Yates accepted as the compromise it was. Cole watched the helicopter until it cleared the ridge. Then he turned back to his men, and to the valley, and to the long, complicated work of accounting for everything that had happened in this place on this morning. An accounting that would take months and classified conversations, and a great deal of careful language, and would ultimately be insufficient. Because some things don't fit in reports. Some things live only in the memory of the men who were there, in the specific indelible memory of how it felt when the math was running out, and the time was running out, and the line was running out, and then something shifted, one clean shot at a time, and the impossible started becoming merely improbable, and then survivable, and then survived. Price stood beside Cole and watched the empty sky where the helicopter had been. "He's going to try to disappear again," Price said. "I know," Cole said. "Back to the supply manifest. Back to the pickup truck that burns oil. Back to the kid and the peanut butter sandwiches." Cole thought about Emma Reed doing a math test, thought about the line between her eyebrows when she was worried, thought about a father who had carried one thing from a life he'd tried to leave and kept it ready and known, on some level, that keeping it ready was the right call. "Let him," Cole said. "He's earned the quiet." Price nodded, looked at the valley one more time. "Hell of a day," he said. "Hell of a day," Cole agreed. The wind moved through the valley. The dust from the fallen tower was still settling, and somewhere above the ridge, a helicopter was carrying a quiet man away from a battlefield where nobody would ever fully be able to explain what he had done, or why he had been able to do it, or what it had cost him to reach back into a life he'd buried and pull from it exactly what was needed. The investigation would start soon. The questions would come. The names would surface. Iron veil the compromised intelligence the people who had put Noah Reed's name in the wrong place. That was coming. But not yet. Right now, a man was going home to his daughter. And for the moment, that was the only math that mattered. The surgery took 4 hours and 11 minutes. Noah knew this because the first thing he did when he came out of anesthesia was look at the clock on the wall of the recovery room at Kessler Medical. And the second thing he did was calculate how long he'd been under. And the third thing he did was ask the nurse if his daughter had been notified. The nurse, a compact, no-nonsense woman named Sergeant Delgado, who had seen enough post-surgical soldiers to know the difference between confusion and clarity, looked at him for a moment and said, "You've been awake for approximately 30 seconds. Has she been notified?" "Sir." "Delgado." He'd read her name tag. "Has my daughter been notified that I'm out of surgery?" Delgado looked at him with the specific expression of a medical professional recalibrating their assessment of a patient. "Captain Cole made the call to Mrs. Gallagher's classroom 40 minutes ago. Your daughter knows you're out of surgery and that you're fine." Noah settled back. "What did she say?" "Apparently, she said, and I was told this secondhand that she figured." Delgado checked his chart. "She also apparently asked if you'd eaten anything today because you always forget to eat when you're busy." Something happened in Noah's face that he didn't try to stop. "She's right," he said. "I did forget." "Shocking," Delgado said dryly. "Rest. You have a visitor waiting, but he can wait longer." "Who?" "Captain Cole." Noah closed his eyes, opened them. "Send him in. I said he can wait." "Delgado?" He looked at her. "Please." She looked back at him for 3 seconds. Then she set down the chart and went to get Cole with the bearing of a woman exercising considerable professional restraint. Cole came in at 1847. He'd cleaned up since the Valley Fresh uniform, no dust, no blood, but he carried the Valley with him in the way that men do after days like this one, in the set of his jaw and the specific quality of his stillness. He pulled a chair to the bedside and sat without being invited, which Noah appreciated, because an invitation would have required social energy he didn't currently have. 4 hours, Cole said. I know, the arm was worse than it looked. Yates told me. He also told me that if you'd waited another 20 minutes to come down from that tower, the blood loss would have... Cole stopped. He told me. But I didn't wait, Noah said. No, you didn't. Cole leaned forward, elbows on knees. Reed, I need to talk to you about something that can't wait for the formal debrief. Noah watched him. He was awake enough now, the anesthesia lifting his mind, coming back to the sharp, clear place it lived when it was working. The intelligence leak, he said. Cole didn't look surprised that he'd gotten there first. You knew, I suspected, during the engagement. Noah shifted against the pillow, careful with the arm. The jamming was too precise. The timing was too deliberate. Someone knew our route and our frequencies. That's not field intelligence, that's source intelligence. Someone with access to classified operational data. The investigation started 2 hours ago, Cole said. Full counterintelligence review. Our unit's movements for the last 30 days, communications logs, access records to the mission briefing. He paused. And your file, Reed. Your complete Iron Veil file. Someone accessed it 48 hours before the ambush. Noah was still. Who had access? That's what the investigation is determining. Cole's voice was careful, in a way that said the carefulness was deliberate. What I can tell you now, and this comes from Major Stearns, who got it from his intelligence counterpart, is that whoever accessed your file did it specifically. They searched your name. Not the unit, not the mission parameters, your name. The implications of that settled in the room between them. They knew I was going to be there, Noah said. Castillo got sick 2 days before the mission, Cole said. You were assigned as his replacement 36 hours before we rolled out. So, whoever accessed my file knew Castillo would be sick, Noah said. He said it the same way he said everything, as a calculation, as a fact being assembled from its components. But his jaw was slightly tighter. Or made him sick. Cole said nothing, because there was nothing to say to that yet. The ambush wasn't about the unit, Noah said. Was it? Cole exhaled. We don't know that yet. Cole? Noah looked at him directly. I spent years reading operations that officially didn't exist. I know what a targeted elimination looks like. The jamming, the timing, the 3-column force, the secondary assault on the casualty point. Those aren't the tactics of a group trying to destroy a reconnaissance unit. Those are the tactics of a group trying to make sure one specific person doesn't leave that valley. He stopped. Who did Iron Veil make angry enough to plan something like this 7 years later? That's a question for the debrief, Cole said. I'm asking it now. Cole looked at him for a long moment. Then, I don't have the full answer. But the preliminary intelligence assessment suggests the operational failure in Iron Veil's last mission. Whatever happened, whatever you were part of, created consequences that didn't resolve when the program was decommissioned. There are people who believe that the individuals involved should have been held accountable. He paused. And apparently some of them have been patient. Noah looked at the ceiling. The specific controlled stillness of a man processing information that lands like physical weight. My daughter, he said quietly, is at school, is safe. We have people watching the building. Cole said it fast, clean, no hesitation. From the moment we got the intelligence assessment, I made that call personally. She is covered, Reed. I give you my word. Noah closed his eyes, kept them closed for a moment. When he opened them, something had changed in his expression. Not fear, not grief, but the specific cold clarity of a man who has just received information that reorganizes his priorities into a single point. I need to get out of this bed, he said. "You need to stay in that bed for at least—" "Cole!" His voice was not loud. It was the voice from the platform measured final. The voice that ended arguments by the specific quality of its certainty. "My daughter does not know she's being watched. She doesn't know any of this. She's going to come home from school today, and she's going to go to Mrs. Patterson's house next door the way she always does when I'm not home, and she is going to be completely unaware that—" He stopped. "I need to be the one to talk to her, not a stranger in a uniform. Me." Cole studied him. "You just had 4 hours of surgery." "I'm aware. Delgado will physically stop you." "Delgado is impressive, but she's 5'4". He started to push himself up, and his face did something involuntary that confirmed Yates's assessment of the arm more clearly than any medical report. Cole put a hand on his shoulder. Firmly. Not aggressive grounding. "Reed, stop." Noah stopped. Not because of the hand, because the arm had just cast a very clear vote. "We can get you a secure line to Emma right now," Cole said. "Video call her teacher's classroom 5 minutes. Then you stay in this bed, and I bring you into the debrief by video link. You don't have to be in the room to be in the conversation." Noah breathed. The arm pulsed. He hated every part of this: the bed, the IV line, the dependency, the distance. He hated being horizontal when the world was moving. But he also understood with the same clarity that had kept him alive for 4 hours in the Blackstone Valley that a man who ignores his own limitations eventually becomes a liability to the people he's trying to protect. 5 minutes, he said. 5 minutes, Cole confirmed. "And Reed, she's fine. She's your kid. She's probably running circles around Mrs. Patterson right now." At 19:03, the secure tablet connected, and Emma Reed's face filled the screen. She was 8 years old, and she had her father's eyes, and she looked at him for exactly 1 second before she said, "You forgot to eat again, didn't you?" Noah laughed. The sound was short and rough and completely real. "Hi, Bug." "Hi." She studied the screen with the specific scrutiny of a child who processes information seriously. "You look bad." "I look fine. Your face is all—" She made a gesture. "Like when you stayed up all night watching basketball and wouldn't admit you were tired." That happened once. It happened 3 times. I counted. She leaned closer to whatever screen she was looking at. "Is that a hospital?" "It's a medical facility." "Same thing." "Technically." "Dad." Her voice shifted. 8 years old, and she could do it, the shift from normal to serious, from kid to something older. She'd learned it from watching him. He'd learned it from necessity. The fact that she'd absorbed it made him proud and broke his heart in equal measure. "Are you okay? For real. Not the you're fine version." He looked at her face on the screen, the line between her eyebrows, the pressed lips, the brave expression over the worried one underneath. "For real," he said. "I'm okay. My arm needs some time. I'll be home in a few days." "How many days?" "A few." "Dad? How many?" "4, he said. "Maybe 5. She accepted this with the seriousness of someone filing it for follow-up. "Mrs. Patterson made spaghetti. I ate 2 bowls." "Good. I saved you some." He had to look away for a second. Just a second. Then back. "That's good, Bug. That's really good. I knew you'd forget to eat." She said it not as accusation, but as statement, the matter-of-fact love of a child who has accepted her parents' flaws and built logistics around them. "I told Tyler at lunch that my dad was doing something important today, and he said his dad is a manager at Target, and I said mine was busy too, but in a different way." "In a different way," Noah repeated. "Yeah." She seemed to consider something. Was it the dangerous kind of important or the boring kind? He looked at her, his daughter, 8 years old, peanut butter on the left side of the bread, a math test today, spaghetti saved in Mrs. Patterson's refrigerator, the line between her eyebrows when she was worried, and the eyes that were his eyes looking at him from 500 miles away, with the specific trust of a child who has decided her father is reliable. The boring kind, he said. She nodded. Okay. And then simply, I love you, Dad. I love you, Bug. He said it the way he said the things that mattered, quietly, without performance, with the full weight of everything he meant by it. Do your homework before you watch TV. I already did it. Of course you did. Math was easy today. I heard. The call ended at 19:08. Cole collected the tablet without comment. Noah lay back and looked at the ceiling and was quiet for a while, and Cole let him be quiet, which was the right call. At 19:21, the debrief started. It happened in a conference room down the hall. Cole Stearns, a counterintelligence officer named Captain Reyes, who had the focused, watchful energy of someone who processed information for a living, and two individuals who introduced themselves by first name only, and whose identification credentials Cole had examined with the particular care of a man who had learned today that trust required verification. Noah participated by secure video link from his bed tablet propped against the water pitcher, which was an indignity he accepted without comment. Reyes ran the debrief with the efficient precision of someone who had done this before and had no patience for tangential information. She moved fast. She asked specific questions. She did not react visibly to the answers, which Noah understood as professional discipline and matched accordingly. An hour in, she said, "Reed, I need to ask you directly about the Iron Veil termination operation." The room got quieter in the specific way rooms get quieter when a subject arrives that everyone has been aware of, but nobody wanted to introduce. Ask, Noah said. The mission designated Iron Veil 7. The final operation before the program was decommissioned. You were the primary asset. Yes. The official record states the mission resulted in partial success with significant friendly casualties and was subsequently classified at the highest level. She looked at him directly. What actually happened? Cole watched Noah's face on the tablet screen. Watched something move through it. Not reluctance exactly, but the specific quality of a man deciding that the time for a particular kind of silence was over. We were sent in to neutralize a target, Noah said. High value, deep cover. The intelligence said the window was 48 hours. He paused. The intelligence was wrong. The window was a setup. Someone had fed us bad coordinates, bad timing, bad target identification. We went in expecting a single structure with 2 guards. We found a reinforced compound with 22. And, Reyes said, and 3 of my team didn't come out. He said it flatly. The flatness of a man who has processed something so many times, it no longer has texture, only weight. I got 2 out. The 3rd? He stopped. We recovered what we could. The target was never in the compound. We were the targets. He looked at Reyes directly. Someone sold Iron Veil 7 before it launched. Sold the team the timeline, the approach vectors, everything. He let that sit for a moment. I spent 2 years trying to find out who. I didn't find out. I found my wife's cancer instead, and then I found Emma, and I stopped looking. The room was very quiet. Until today, Reyes said. Until today, Noah agreed, because today told me the answer is still out there, patient, waiting. He looked at something off-screen for a moment. Whoever sold Iron Veil 7 didn't do it once. They're still active, still connected. They accessed my file 48 hours ago because someone told them I'd been assigned to Cole's unit. And someone told them that because they still have access. Reyes and the 2 unnamed individuals exchanged a look. Cole watched Noah on the screen and thought about worn rifle case latches smooth from regular handling. Thought about a man who had kept one thing ready. Not out of aggression, not out of plan. Just in case. You kept the rifle case current, Cole said suddenly. Every component maintained. You kept it ready. Noah looked at him. Yes. You said you never intended to fire another shot. I didn't intend to. A pause. But I'm realistic. And Reyes leaned forward. Reed, What you did today from the drainage platform that changes your profile significantly. Whoever targeted this operation will know by now that it failed and approximately why. They'll adjust. I know. Your daughter's security detail is in place, but it's not a long-term solution. I know that too. Which means I have to finish what I tried to stop doing 7 years ago. He said it the way he'd said everything today, not dramatically, not reluctantly, as a fact, as the result of math done honestly. I have to find who sold the team. I have to make sure they can't access another file, another mission, another operation. He looked at Reyes. And I'm going to need your help to do it, because I've been out of the infrastructure for 7 years, and they haven't. Cole sat back, looked at the unnamed individuals, watched them look at each other. One of them said, "What do you need?" It was 2034 when the debrief concluded. Reyes walked out with the unnamed individuals already talking in the low, rapid way of people with work to do. Cole stayed. He sat in the now empty conference room for a moment, and then he walked back down the hall to Noah's room, and he sat in the same chair he'd used before. Noah was on the tablet again. Not a call, a document. Something Reyes had sent him. His eyes moved across it with the same efficiency they'd moved across the valley this morning. "Read," Cole said. "Sir." "Off the record. Completely off." Noah looked up, waited. "What you did today," Cole said. "Not the shots, not the tower. The whole thing from the moment that case clicked open to the moment the QRF secured the valley. I've been trying to find the right word for it all day, and I keep coming back to the wrong ones." "What words?" "Heroic, brave, sacrifice." Cole shook his head. "They're not wrong exactly, but they make it sound like it was about something bigger than it was. Like it was performed." "It wasn't performed," Noah said. "No, it wasn't." Cole looked at him. "So what was it?" Noah was quiet for a moment. The tablet sat in his lap. The room was quiet, and the medical facility was quiet around them, the specific quiet of a place where people were either recovering or not, and either way, it wasn't loud. "It was a Tuesday," Noah said finally. Cole looked at him. "It was a Tuesday," Noah repeated. "Emma had a math test. I'd packed her lunch wrong the day before, put the peanut butter on the right side, and she didn't say anything, but she ate less of it, which means she noticed. I'd been meaning to rotate the oil in the truck for 2 weeks. I had 7 invoices on my desk that needed signing." He looked at Cole. "I didn't do anything today because of bravery. I did it because there were people down there with lunches and trucks and daughters of their own, and I was in a position to help, and not helping would have been the wrong answer to the math." Cole said nothing. "That's all it was," Noah said. "I know how to do one specific thing very well. Today, that thing was needed. I did it." He looked back at the tablet. "The hard part wasn't the shots. The hard part is always what you carry afterward." Cole stayed another 20 minutes. Not because there was business left, there wasn't. Because it felt like the wrong thing to leave too quickly, and Cole had learned over 14 years to trust those feelings. Paula. When he left, he walked past Delgado at the nursing station. She was writing something in a chart, efficient, unhurried. "He's going to try to get out of bed tonight," Cole told her. She didn't look up. "I know. He has genuinely excellent reasons. They always do. He has a daughter." She looked up at that. "I know." She held Cole's gaze for a moment. He talked about her the whole time he was in recovery, before he was even fully conscious. He was talking about peanut butter sandwiches and math tests. She set down the pen. "I've been doing this 14 years, Captain. I know the difference between a man who's fighting to survive and a man who's fighting to get home. Reed's not fighting to survive." Cole nodded. "No," he said. "He's not." He drove back to the command building at 2119. The next twist came at 2203, and it came in the form of a file. Reyes sent it to Cole's secure terminal with a flag marked "Urgent" and a single line of text beneath it. "We found the access point. You need to see this now." Cole opened it, read it again, sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a long moment. The intelligence leak. The person who had accessed Noah Reed's Iron Veil file 48 hours before the ambush, the person who had presumably fed operational details to the force in Blackstone Valley, was not an outside actor, was not a hostile intelligence service working through intermediaries, was not a sophisticated external penetration of secure systems. It was an inside access, authorized credentials. Someone with legitimate clearance to the classified personnel database who had used that clearance for something it was not intended for. Someone at Firebase Kessler. Cole read the name 3 times. Then he picked up the phone. The arrest happened at 2247. Cole wasn't there for it. Reyes handled it with the 2 unnamed individuals and 2 military police officers, clean and fast and quiet, in the way that these things are done when the institution needs to contain the damage before the damage spreads. The individual was removed from their quarters, processed, separated. It happened in less than 20 minutes. Cole received confirmation at 2311. He sat with it for a while. Then, he went back to the medical facility, past Delgado, who raised an eyebrow but didn't stop him, down the hall, into the room. Noah was awake. He was sitting up, which was a negotiated position upright enough to work horizontal enough to satisfy Yates's repeated instructions. The tablet was in his hands. "You already know," Cole said. It wasn't a question. "Reyes sent me the same file," Noah said. "Same time she sent it to you." Cole sat down. "Someone we trusted. Someone they trusted more," Noah said. "That's how it works. The best intelligence assets are always the ones who look exactly like they're supposed to look." He set the tablet down. "I'm not surprised. He stopped. "I've been doing this math for 7 years. The access had to be close. It was always going to be someone close." "Did you know before today?" "No. I had categories, not names." He looked at Cole. "But I'll know more now. Reyes is already pulling the thread. Whoever is at the far end of this, whoever sold Iron Veil 7, whoever's been running this for 7 years, they've just lost their access point. They're going to move, adjust, try to close the exposure." He paused. "And when they move, we'll see them." Cole looked at him. This man supply clerk, single father quiet presence in the back of a Humvee who had carried a rifle case with worn latches and a letter with careful handwriting, and who was now in a hospital bed with one arm in a sling, dismantling a 7-year-old intelligence operation with the same measured, unhurried precision he'd used on the drainage platform. "You've been planning this," Cole said quietly. "Not today. All of it. The supply posting, the low profile, the maintenance on the rifle." "No," Noah said. And then more honestly, not planning, preparing. There's a difference. He looked at the window. Planning means you know what's coming. Preparing means you accept that you don't know, and you keep one thing sharp just in case. He was quiet for a moment. "I hoped I'd never need it. I hoped I was wrong to keep it ready." He looked at Cole. "I wasn't wrong." At 23:47, with 13 minutes left in the longest day of his life, Noah Reed did something that surprised Delgado, who had thought she was past being surprised. He asked her to help him to the window, not to leave, not to push the limits of what his body was capable of, just to stand at the window for a few minutes and look at whatever was outside. Bundy, she helped him. Because 14 years of reading patience had taught her that sometimes what a person needs at the end of a day like this one is not medical. It's just a window. He stood there for 11 minutes, left arm in its sling, right hand against the glass, and he looked at whatever was out there, the dark, the base, the lights, whatever was visible from a medical facility window at midnight, and he was quiet, in the way he'd been quiet all day, not empty but full. Full of something that took up a great deal of space and required no audience. He thought about his wife. He did that sometimes in the quiet moments, let himself think about her directly instead of around the edges. Her name was Sarah. She'd known what he was when she married him, known about the program, known about the rifle case, and she'd loved him anyway, with the specific clear-eyed love of a woman who had decided that the whole person was worth having, including the parts that were difficult to understand. She'd made him promise near the end that he would not let Emma grow up in the shadow of what he'd been. That he would be present, that he would pack the lunches and show up for the math tests and be the kind of father who was there, actually there, not somewhere else in his head. He'd kept that promise. He'd kept it hard, the way you keep promises that cost something daily. Today had cost something. He knew it. There would be a reckoning, not physical, not operational, but interior. The part of him that had promised Sarah he was done had been asked to come back today, and it had come back without hesitation, and it had been very, very good at being back. He was going to have to sit with that. But not tonight. Tonight he was alive, Emma was safe, and the thread that had been loose for 7 years was finally being pulled. He went back to bed at 23:58. Delgado adjusted the IV, checked his vitals, said nothing about the window. At 0:13, Cole sent him a message. 3 words. Get some sleep. Noah put the tablet down, closed his eyes. For the first time in 7 years, the thing he'd been watching for had a shape, a direction, a thread he could follow. And for the first time in 7 years, the rifle case could stay closed. Not because the work was done, because for tonight, someone else was doing it, because Reyes was pulling the thread, because Cole had his men and his answers and his investigation, because a little girl in a house somewhere had spaghetti saved in Mrs. Patterson's refrigerator and would sleep fine tonight knowing her dad was okay. He didn't sleep immediately. He lay in the dark and he breathed the controlled, measured breath of a man who'd spent 30 years learning to manage the inside of himself so the outside could function, and he let the day settle. Morrison. He thought about Morrison, who had held a position alone until he couldn't, who hadn't come out of the valley. He would write that letter. He would find out if Morrison had a daughter, a son, a wife, someone who needed to know that he hadn't been forgotten in the accounting, that the line he'd held mattered. He would do that when he could hold a pen. He thought about Huang, who had watched him work all morning with a look on his face that started as disbelief and became something closer to understanding. He thought about Torres, with the through and through on his right arm, functional still in the fight. He thought about Garza, who had frozen and been pulled back to himself by Cole's hands and Cole's words, and then had fought for the rest of the day with the specific determination of someone with something to prove. Good men, all of them, ordinary in all the ways that matter and extraordinary in the one that did. He thought about Cole, who had looked at a supply clerk and seen in 3 seconds something worth trusting, who had made a call on incomplete information and been right, who had stood at the base of a collapsing tower and held the radio and not looked away. Good commander. The best kind. The kind who leads from the front and respects the people he leads and never, not once, treats the men under him as expendable. Noah Reed, who had tried very hard for 7 years to be invisible, had been seen today. By all of them. By Huang and Briggs and Price and Cole and Yates and Delgado. Seen for what he was, which was not just a supply clerk, and not just an Iron Veil operator, and not just a father. All 3. All of it. The whole complicated, contradictory, difficult person. He closed his eyes. Outside somewhere in the base, the investigation continued. Reyes and her people worked through the night, pulling the thread, following it toward whoever was at the end. The work was patient and meticulous, and it would take time, not hours, but weeks, maybe months. The slow, patient work of counterintelligence that looked nothing like a drainage platform, but required exactly the same quality of focus and precision. He trusted Reyes to do it. He would help when he was needed, But tonight he was done. He slept at 0031, and he did not dream about the valley or the tower or the rifle or the math. He dreamed about Emma at the kitchen table, doing homework, the line between her eyebrows, her small focused face, bent over fractions, or state capitals, or whatever had been assigned that week. He dreamed about the sound of pencil on paper, and the smell of peanut butter, and the particular domestic quiet of a small house, where two people who loved each other very much were doing ordinary things in the same room. He dreamed about going home, and in the dream he was almost there. He was discharged on a Thursday, not with ceremony, not with formation or flags or the organized pageantry that the Army sometimes produces for moments it wants to remember publicly. Just Yates handing him a discharge summary and a prescription and a list of restrictions that Noah folded and put in his pocket without reading, because he already knew what was on it, and he already knew which parts he was going to follow, and which parts he was going to negotiate with quietly over the next several weeks. Delgado walked him to the door. She didn't say much. At the threshold she stopped and looked at him with the directness of a woman who had watched him sleep and fight and grieve and calculate in the same 12-hour window, and had formed a precise opinion about what she'd seen. "The arm needs 6 weeks," she said. "I know." "Not 4, not 5, 6. "I know." "Ayim, read." She waited until he looked at her. "Go home. Actually go. Don't be somewhere else in your head while you're standing in your kitchen. Be there." He looked at her for a moment. "How many patients have you told that to?" "Not many," she said. "Most of them don't need it. You do." He nodded. "Thank you, Delgado." "Don't come back," she said, which in her particular dialect meant, "Take care of yourself," which meant, "I mean it about the 6 weeks," which meant something warmer than any of those words individually. He walked out into a morning that was clear and cold and indifferent to everything that had happened in the last 4 days, the way mornings are. The truck was in the lot. Someone had driven it from the staging area. He didn't know who, but the keys were in his kit, and it started on the second try, the way it always did, and burned oil, the way it always did, and smelled exactly like itself, which was old coffee and Emma's strawberry chapstick that she'd left on the seat, and a faint trace of everything that was ordinary, and his. Yeah. He sat in the parking lot for 3 minutes before he drove. Not because he wasn't ready, because he wanted to sit in the specific reality of it, a live, discharged, truck-running daughter 7 hours away, and let it be real before he moved into the next thing. Cole had come by the previous night. Final debrief update. The investigation had moved faster than anyone expected, which Reyes attributed to the fact that the access point had been careless in ways that suggested confidence rather than caution. The confidence of someone who had operated without consequence for a long time and had stopped believing consequences were coming. That confidence had left a trail, and the trail had led somewhere significant. Cole had sat in the chair, the same chair he always took, the same chair, which Noah had noticed, and he delivered the update with the careful precision of a man who understood that the person he was talking to had been waiting 7 years for this information and deserved to receive it without performance. The individual arrested at Kessler had given a full statement within 36 hours. Full cooperation, full disclosure, the specific eagerness of someone who understands that the arithmetic of their situation has changed permanently and wants to be on the right side of the new math. The statement had confirmed what Reyes suspected: a network, not a single actor. 3 people at different levels of the intelligence apparatus connected by something that had started years before Iron Veil and had continued operating quietly in the years since, selling access and information in pieces small enough to avoid pattern detection. The network had a center, a name, someone who had been at the time of Iron Veil 7 in a position of authority over the program itself. Someone who had sold the team from the inside from the top and had spent 7 years maintaining their position and their cover and their access, while 3 operators who'd gone into a compound in a country that officially had no U.S. presence had not come home. Cole had given Noah the name. Noah had sat with it for a long time. He didn't say what he felt about the name. He didn't perform the reaction, the rage, the vindication, the grief arriving in its proper place after 7 years of misdirection. He sat with it quietly, the way he sat with everything, and he let it settle into the full picture, and he said, "Is the case solid?" "Reyes says it'll hold," Cole said. "Full counterintelligence review corroborating evidence from 3 independent sources, the statement from Kessler as primary. It'll hold. And the others, the 2 from Ironvale 7 who didn't come out. Their families will be notified, full accounting, posthumous recognition." Cole paused. "It won't be public. The program doesn't officially exist, but it'll be real." Noah had nodded, looked at the window. "Morrison," he said. "His wife is in Columbus. 2 kids. I wrote the letter myself." Cole's voice was careful around Morrison's name, careful in the way of a commander who takes his losses personally and privately. "I told her he held the line, that he didn't leave his position, that the unit survived partly because of what he did." He paused. "I didn't have a better way to say it." "That's the right way," Noah said. "That's exactly right." They'd sat quietly for a moment. And then Cole had said, "Reyes wants to talk to you about a formal role, not operational. She's not asking you to go back to what you were. Consulting. Analytical. Using what you know to help close what's still open." He'd looked at him directly. "On your terms. Your timeline. With the understanding that Emma comes first and the work fits around that, not the other way around." Noah had been quiet for a long time. "Let me get home first," he'd said. That's all she's asking. Now 4 days later he drove. 7 hours. He stopped twice gas coffee and once at a rest stop in the middle of nowhere because his arm needed a break from the wheel and his head needed 5 minutes of air that wasn't moving. He stood outside the truck and looked at whatever was in front of him and breathed, and he thought about Sarah, which he'd been doing more since the valley, letting himself think about her directly. She would have had opinions about all of this. She always had opinions. Clear, honest, occasionally inconvenient opinions delivered with the specific warmth of a woman who loved him enough to tell him the truth. She would have said you were always going to end up back in it. Not because you're broken, because you're built for it. The question was never whether, the question was how. She would have said just make sure Emma knows which part of you is real. That's all. She was right the way she'd usually been right. All of it was real. The supply clerk and the Ironvale operator and the single father and the man who stood on a drainage platform and did the math. All of it was the same person always had been. He'd spent 7 years trying to keep them separate, trying to put the hard parts in a case with worn latches and close the lid, and what the Blackstone Valley had done was simply demonstrate that the lid was always going to be the wrong solution. He needed to carry it whole, all of it, the way he carried Emma's letter against his chest. He got back in the truck. He arrived at 4:47 in the afternoon, which meant Emma was home from school, which meant she was either doing homework or attempting to negotiate with Mrs. Patterson about the television schedule. 2 activities that occupied most of the post-school hours when Noah wasn't there. He parked in the driveway, turned off the engine, sat for a moment. The house looked exactly like itself. Small, unassuming, a little overdue for a paint refresh on the front trim, the flower bed that Sarah had planted, and Noah had maintained in the imperfect way of someone who knew nothing about flowers but refused to let them die. It looked like everything he'd been moving toward for 4 days, and everything he'd been moving toward for much longer than that. He got out of the truck. The front door opened before he reached the porch. Emma came out at a speed that suggested she'd been watching the window for the last 45 minutes, which she would deny if asked, and which Mrs. Patterson, visible in the doorway behind her, with a smile she wasn't trying to hide, would absolutely confirm if asked. She hit him at full speed. Both arms around his waist. She'd learned to compensate for the sling before she even fully registered it, because she was 8 years old, and she read situations faster than most adults, and she pressed her face against his chest, and didn't say anything for a moment. He held her with his good arm. He pressed his face against the top of her head. They stood like that in the front yard for a while. "You're late," she said finally into his jacket. I said 4 to 5 days. It was 5 days? Then I'm on time. She leaned back and looked at his face with the specific scrutiny she'd been applying to him since she was old enough to know what scrutiny was. Looking for the thing underneath the thing. Looking for the truth behind the "you're fine" version. He let her look. You lost weight, she said. I forgot to eat. I know. She glanced at the sling. How bad? Manageable. Dad, 6 weeks and I'll be fine. Delgado's orders. Who's Delgado? A very impressive woman who is 5'4" and correct about most things. Emma considered this. I like her already. She looked at him again. Are you actually okay? Not the "you're fine" version. The real version. He thought about what Delgado had said. Be there. Actually be there. Don't be somewhere else in your head. He crouched down to her level, which took some doing with the arm, and he looked at his daughter's face. The line between her eyebrows. The brave expression over the worried one. His own eyes looking back at him, and he said, Yeah, Bug. The real version. I'm okay. She searched his face for 3 seconds. Then she nodded. She'd found what she was looking for. Mrs. Patterson has spaghetti, she said. You mentioned. There's also garlic bread this time. Even better. She made a lot. She thought you looked thin in the video call. I'll eat more than one bowl. Emma took his good hand and led him toward the house, which was something she'd done since she was 4 years old, and which still hit him in the same place every time, that small hand. That complete trust, the absolute assumption that he was going to be there when she reached for him. That was the responsibility that no program, no classified file, no 7-year investigation had ever come close to touching in terms of weight and significance. That was the math that mattered most. Mrs. Patterson met them at the door. She was 63, had lived next door for 11 years, and had been the infrastructure that made Noah's particular version of single fatherhood functional. She looked at him now the way she always looked at him when he came back from something, not with questions, not with the particular nosiness of someone trying to understand what he did, but with the warm, practical relief of a woman who cared about the people in her orbit and was glad they were back in it. You need feeding, she said. I've been told. Come in, both of you. The bread's still warm. He ate 2 bowls of spaghetti and 3 pieces of garlic bread, which Mrs. Patterson recorded mentally, as evidence that the situation had been more serious than he'd indicated, but accepted as progress. Emma ate her 2nd bowl of the week and talked about the math test she'd gotten a perfect score, which she mentioned with the careful casualness of someone who had absolutely been waiting to mention it, and about Tyler, whose dad managed a Target, and about a book she'd started reading that was about a girl who discovered her grandmother had been a spy, which she found extremely plausible given recent events, though she didn't say that last part out loud. Thus, Noah listened, fully, not performing attention. Actually, they're actually present the way Delgado had meant when she'd said it. He was in the kitchen and not somewhere else in his head, and it was the most specific and intentional choice he'd made all day. More intentional even than the shots on the drainage platform, because this was the thing that required the most from him, and the most from the part of him that was still learning how to do it. He was there. After dinner, after the dishes, after Mrs. Patterson had gone home with the specific satisfaction of a woman who had performed a genuine service. Noah and Emma sat on the back porch in the cool evening air and did what they sometimes did. In the quiet hours, nothing specific, just occupied the same space in the comfortable way of 2 people who didn't need to fill silence to feel connected. Emma had a book. She read. Noah sat with his coffee and let his mind be quieter than it had been in days. After a while, she said without looking up from the page, "Were people in danger?" He looked at her. "Yes." "Did you help?" "Yes." She turned a page. "Good," she said with the same matter-of-fact certainty she'd used when she said she figured he was fine. The certainty of a child who has decided her parent is reliable and builds her understanding of the world around that decision. He looked at her profile, small face bent over the book, the line between her eyebrows, his eyes in her face, and he thought Sarah. She's so much yours. The way she absorbs information and processes it and arrives at a conclusion and then just lives inside the conclusion without drama. That's yours. I gave her the eyes and she gave herself everything else. Dad, Emma said. Yeah, the girl in this book. Her grandmother was a spy and nobody knew, and she kept it secret her whole life. She looked up. That seems lonely. He was quiet for a moment. It probably was, he said. Is it lonely? She asked. The thing you do. The thing you used to do. She said it carefully, the way she said things when she wasn't sure of the edges. I know it's complicated. Mom told me it was complicated before she stopped, started again. She said you were a complicated person doing a hard job because you thought it was the right thing to do. And that complicated didn't mean bad. Noah sat with his coffee and his daughter and the evening and the weight of everything that had happened in the last 5 days, and he thought about Sarah saying that complicated doesn't mean bad. And he thought about worn rifle case latches and iron watch tower and Morrison's wife in Columbus and Reyes pulling a thread that had been loose for 7 years. Sometimes, he said. It was lonely sometimes. Emma nodded, processed. But you're here now. I'm here now, so it's not lonely right now. No, he said. Right now it's the opposite of lonely. She looked at him for a moment with an expression that was too old for 8 and exactly right for her, and then she went back to her book, and Noah sat in the quiet, and he was there. 3 weeks later, Reyes came to the house. She called first 2 days' notice, no pressure, she'd come to him. She arrived in a car that looked like every other car on the street, wearing clothes that looked like every other person in the neighborhood, which was either coincidence or professional habit, and Noah suspected it was the latter. Emma was at school. Mrs. Patterson was next door. The house was quiet. They sat at the kitchen table. Reyes had a folder. She opened it and slid the first document across. Noah looked at it. The name on it was one he recognized because Cole had given it to him in the hospital room, and he'd been living with it for 3 weeks quietly, without obsession, but constantly the way you live with something unresolved. It's done, he asked. Charges filed. Full counterintelligence package. The prosecutor's office says it's the cleanest case they've seen at this classification level in 20 years. Reyes looked at him directly. Iron Veil 7 is fully documented now. The operators who didn't come out are on record. Their families have been notified, and compensation proceedings have begun. Noah nodded, looked at the document, looked past it for a moment at something that wasn't in the room. The other 2 members of the network, he said. In custody. Both cooperating. She slid a second document. The full scope is wider than we initially assessed. This wasn't just Iron Veil. There are at least 4 other operations that were compromised through the same network over 8 years. We're working backward through all of them. You need my knowledge of Iron Veil to contextualize some of what you're finding, Noah said, not a question. Yes, and the consulting role Cole mentioned. Still on the table. Still on your terms. She looked at him. I've been doing this work for 12 years, Reed. I've never brought a consulting offer to someone's kitchen table before. I'm here because the work needs what you know, and because I think you're the kind of person who needs to know that what you know is being used for the right thing. Whoa. Noah was quiet for a moment. He looked at the folder. He looked at the kitchen. Emma's homework from yesterday, still on the counter, the strawberry chapstick she was always leaving, places a drawing taped to the refrigerator that she'd made 3 weeks ago, before any of this happened. 2 stick figures labeled Dad and Me, standing in front of a house that had a lopsided chimney and a flower bed that looked significantly better than his actual flower bed. What's the time commitment? He said. Variable. Your schedule. Your availability. We work around Emma, not the other way around. I'd need to be reachable during school hours but present after 3:30. Understood. And if something urgent comes up at 3:30? We find another way. This is analytical work, Reed, not operational. You are not going back in the field. She said it clearly without hedging. I need your mind, not your rifle. He looked at her. My rifle's retired. Good, she said. Keep it that way. He closed the folder, pushed it back across the table, not in refusal, but as punctuation. He'd read what he needed to read, and the rest was settled. Send me the first briefing package, he said. I'll start when Emma goes back to school on Monday. Reyes stood, collected the folder. At the door she paused and said, For what it's worth, what you did in the Blackstone Valley. I read every debrief, every after-action report, every witness statement. Noah waited. Cole's statement says you were the reason 41 men came home, she said. But I think you already know that's not how you see it. I see it as math that worked out, he said. I know. She looked at him. That's why I'm here. She left. He stood at the door for a moment after she drove away. Then he went back to the kitchen and finished his coffee, standing at the counter, looking at the drawing on the refrigerator. 2 stick figures, Dad and me. The lopsided chimney. The flower bed that looked better than the real one, which was Emma's editorial opinion expressed in crayon. The last piece came on a Tuesday. 6 weeks after the Blackstone Valley. Noah's arm cleared by the follow-up physician. The restrictions lifted, the 6 weeks honored in full, because Delgado had been right, and he'd known it. Emma had a half day at school, which meant she was home by noon, and they'd made a plan, nothing specific, just the loose Tuesday afternoon kind of plan that meant whatever felt right when they got to it. What felt right, it turned out, was the park 3 blocks over. Emma on the swings. Noah on the bench, the easy midweek quiet of a park that's mostly empty on a Tuesday afternoon. She was talking about the book she'd finished, the Spy Grandmother book, and she had opinions about the ending, which she delivered with the confident specificity of a reader who took narrative justice seriously. The grandmother should have told her sooner, Emma said from the swing. Why? Noah asked. Because the granddaughter could have handled it. She kept treating her like she couldn't handle it, but she could. She handled everything else. Emma pushed off the ground, gaining height. Sometimes, grown-ups don't tell kids things because they think they're protecting them, but actually they're just making the kids feel like they can't be trusted with the truth. Noah looked at his daughter. 8 years old, swinging, entirely comfortable with what she'd just said, not performing insight, just reporting an observation from a book that had nothing to do with anything and everything to do with everything. Bug, he said. Yeah, there are things I haven't told you, about what I used to do, about what happened 6 weeks ago. He said it directly, the way she said things, without hedging, without performance. Not because I don't think you can handle them, because some of them are still, he searched for the right word, still settling, in me. And I wanted to understand them myself before I tried to explain them to you. She let the swing slow, dragged her feet, looked at him with complete attention. Okay, she said. When they're settled, you'll tell me. I'll tell you. Not everything. Some things are classified, but the things I can tell you I will. She sat on the still swing and considered this with the seriousness of a person negotiating terms. Then she said, Is classified a real thing, or is it a grown-up excuse? It's a real thing. Okay. She seemed to accept this. Are you going to do more of it? The important stuff. Some, he said, differently than before. From home mostly. You'll still have me at 3:30. Every day. Every day. She nodded. The line between her eyebrows released. He watched it happen, that specific, easing the worried expression under the brave one, settling into something that was just ordinary and calm. She'd needed to hear the 3:30 part. That was the number that mattered to her. He understood that because it was the number that mattered to him too. Okay, she said. And then she started swinging again because the negotiation was complete, and the afternoon was still there to be used. He watched her swing. He sat on the bench with his cleared arm and his coffee going cold, and the loose Tuesday afternoon spreading out in front of them. Ordinary and unremarkable, and exactly what he'd been fighting for through every calculated minute of every terrible hour in the Blackstone Valley. This right here, this specific unremarkable Tuesday with his daughter on the swings, 3 blocks from a house with a lopsided flower bed. Pushipai. His phone buzzed. Cole, a text Huang made Sergeant. Thought you'd want to know. He smiled, typed back, he earned it. Tell him from me. Cole. Already did. He said to tell you he watches his left now automatically. Said you ruined him. He looked at that for a moment. Then he put the phone away. Emma was laughing at something. The swing, the speed, the simple physical joy of momentum, and the sound of it was the specific unguarded laugh of a child who is completely present in a moment, not worried about what came before or what comes next, just fully inside the Tuesday afternoon. Bets. He leaned back on the bench, closed his eyes for a moment, felt the cold air and the distant sound of his daughter laughing, and the specific earned quiet of a man who has done the thing that needed doing and come out the other side of it, still holding the things that matter. The Blackstone Valley investigation would continue for months. Reyes would call on Monday mornings. The briefing packages would arrive, and he would read them at the kitchen table after Emma left for school, and he would apply what he knew in the way Reyes needed it applied, and the network would close piece by piece, because that was how this kind of work got done, not in one dramatic hour on a drainage platform, but in patient, methodical daily attention to the thread. He was good at that kind of patience. He'd been practicing it for 8 years. Day. The men from Iron Veil 7. The ones who hadn't come out would be honored in the way classified operations honor their dead quietly officially, with full documentation and family notification, and the specific private gravity that the institution reserves for things it cannot say publicly. He would write his own account of that operation and give it to Reyes, and it would go into a file, and the file would matter to the families, even if it never went anywhere else. That mattered. He would make it matter. And on Tuesdays, when Emma had a half day, he would be on this bench. He would answer the phone at 3:30 every day. He would put the peanut butter on the left side of the bread. He would carry the letter she'd written. Don't be boring. Do something exciting against his chest. Not because he needed a reminder, but because he chose to. Because it was the truest thing he owned. Emma jumped off the swing at the top of the arc, which she knew she wasn't supposed to do, and which she'd been doing since she was 6, and she landed in a crouch and stood up and looked at him, with the grin of someone who has committed a minor transgression and is comfortable with the consequences. You're not supposed to do that, he said. I know, she said. I landed fine. You always land fine until you don't. That's true of everything, she said with the precise accidental wisdom of 8 years old. He looked at his daughter, his eyes in her face, Sarah's everything else. Yeah, he said. It is. He stood up from the bench. She took his good hand, the automatic complete trusting reach that she'd been doing since she was 4, and they walked home through the Tuesday afternoon past the ordinary houses of ordinary people, living ordinary lives, which was the thing that was worth protecting, the thing that required the drainage platforms and the classified programs and the worn rifle case latches and the math that had to work out right even when the numbers were ugly. The ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the child's hand in yours, the house 3 blocks away with the lopsided flower bed. That was what it was all for. That was the whole answer. Noah Reed had never been the loudest person in any room he'd ever stood in. He had never needed to be. The work he did lived in the space between what was visible and what was possible, in the quiet precision of a man who understood that the most important things rarely announce themselves. He walked his daughter home on a Tuesday afternoon, and nobody who passed them on the sidewalk saw anything worth remembering. Just a man and a kid, ordinary, unremarkable, exactly where they were supposed to be. Which was the point. Which had always been the point. Some men carry their valor in ribbons and speeches, and the public accounting of what they've done. Others carry it in a folded letter pressed against their chest, in the weight of a small hand in theirs, in the daily, deliberate, undefeated choice to be present for the person who needs them most. Noah Reed had never asked to be remembered. He had only ever asked to get home. He got home. And that was enough. That was exactly, completely, finally enough.